And so much for a quiet little month off here as the Patriots dismissed from OTAs because Jack Jones arrested Friday night at Logan Airport with 2 loaded guns and extra magazines in his carry-on bag going through airport security. He was down at the courthouse today with his lawyer, and they seem like they have a case here. They're fighting, but not a good last few days from Jack Jones.
Yeah, obviously, and we'll see ultimately how this plays out. On the surface, it looked like he made he did make a really dumb mistake bringing 2 guns to an airport. You can't do that, obviously. It sounds like they're kind of setting it up that the guns weren't his. He didn't know they were in the bag. I'd still call it not a great decision to be around people who will put guns in your suitcase without telling you right before you leave for a trip. But the lawyer whose name I'm forgetting.
It's like Rosemary
something. Well, I want to get her name right because she is an important part of this story. Rosa Scapiccio, I think. Rose Scapiccio. So she's from here. She's from Brighton. She grew up in Brighton. She went to Suffolk for undergrad. She went to Suffolk for her law degree for law school, and she has done some very high profile work. There's a Netflix documentary about one of her cases. I believe it's called Trial 4. I am actually going to watch that tonight. I'm kind of curious about this, but this is kind of what she does. And I, talking to people in the legal community, they said if he's going to beat this is the person that's going to do it. So I certainly think that's notable. It does kind of feel like they're setting it up for, hey, it wasn't his gun, and try to get it plead down or something like that. The one thing I do understand, I don't want to get too much into legal stuff of it because we're just going to be up here guessing, and we could have a lawyer on, but although lawyers know a lot, they're also very boring. So I don't really feel like doing that to you guys, the viewers and the listeners. And my family's mostly lawyers, so I can say that. Some of the charges against him come with mandatory minimums. So what that means is if he's found guilty, like when the judge sets the sentence, it has to be at least that many years. He can't get off without jail time. And I believe if I read it right, the magazine charge, which is the big one, carries a 2.5-year mandatory minimum, and some of them carry 1 year as well. So I've seen the number of like 30 years in jail thrown out there. That would be if he went to trial, carried it all the way through, was found guilty of everything. That is the maximum jail time he could be sentenced to. It never works like that. That's never what ends up happening, especially not with a lawyer like this. Something is going to get plead down, or certain charges will get thrown out for other charges, something like that. He's not going to do 30 years. There is a real chance he could do some time. And that is kind of what this is going to come down to from a life point of view for Jack Jones. And let's separate this too, because it's important. There are real world life implications for him, for a young man who has, from all accounts, done a lot to turn his life around since he got into some trouble when he was in college early on. There are life implications for him, and there are football implications for him. In some ways, those overlap. In some ways, they don't. But it sounds like he is the best possible lawyer to help get him out. And now we kind of see what happens. Now, where we can bring the football part of it in is because court dates take a long time. Like the court system's all backed up and whatever. He's next due in court. One of the preliminary hearings. It's not like the actual court date. Like, they're going to decide innocent, guilty, jury, all that. It's like an initial one is August 18th. That's the day before the Patriots' second preseason game. So they don't necessarily have the luxury of, all right, we're going to see what the court rules, and then we'll decide if we keep him or not. Well, at that point, you're probably going to be partway into the season, if not done with the season. So they're going to have to do, I guess they don't have to do something. They can just kind of keep him. But something's going to happen here, I think, in these next 6 to 8 weeks, maybe if not before training camp, into training camp. I almost feel like he's on the same timeline as DeAndre Hopkins, just as a coincidence. But the league will look at it, and there was a statement from the league today that they're monitoring it. That'll be the first thing. Does he get suspended? Does he get put on the commissioner exempt list? If that happens, then it kind of helps the Patriots because he doesn't count against the roster. They can sort of just keep him buried and wait to decide. If he doesn't get suspended, well, then is he on the 53-man roster or not? Are you bringing him to camp or not? Are you keeping him a part of your team or not? Jeff Howe had the report this morning that they were very unhappy with him for what happened. Obviously, this team has a history that they have to be aware of. Not that this individual transgression rises to the level of what Aaron Hernandez did, but the idea is this is essentially 2 strikes around for this guy now. You had the one with the Panda Express when he was in college, and for now it looks like a second, and maybe that gets overturned, but they kind of have to look at where the facts are as they are. And I know it's innocent until proven guilty. I get that, but they're not going to have a innocent or guilty plea before they have to make a decision on him. So they kind of have to do their own work on this. So that, to me, it feels like where he's at. I still think a lot of it is unknown, but for now, it seems like he's doing the best he can to handle the legal side of it, and the football side will come when it comes.
It will, like, because you said they don't have to do anything, but then he's going to be out there. We're going to, like, media's going to be there talking to him, which could be something they want to avoid. I found it interesting. The lawyer was talking today and said social media stuff, the thug almost got him fired, right? And then she went into detail saying, like, I have it, we're grateful to the Patriots organization and the leader of the Patriots that they didn't believe into that. So that almost made it sound like they were going to release him, and then they talked to the lawyer or whatever, heard their story, heard their plan, and now they're not from the moment.
Yeah, and there was the other interesting things she said, and it's along the lines of that. She mentioned, and I'm trying to remember what the exact words are. I don't know. Do I have the quote here in front of me? I do. She mentioned he's being portrayed as a thug and a gang member and all of that, which he shouldn't be at this point, and I agree with that. He absolutely shouldn't be. But she said, this is the exact quote: "That label, thug, gang member, that label that was attached to him through social media almost got him fired, and it was completely unfounded." And then she says later, "We're grateful to the Patriots organization and to the leaders of the Patriots that they didn't believe and feed into what was happening on social media, where people were saying he was trying to get the guns past security," which I don't think anybody ever believed he was trying to, like, get the anyway. It's interesting that she put it like that. It almost got him fired. So it sounds like at some point a conversation about cutting him in the last 2 days, 3 days, like since it happened, right? It sounds like there was a conversation about cutting him, maybe based on public perception, maybe based on the court of public opinion. Whether that's right or wrong, it does sound like that happened. And they ultimately decided not to cut him, at least not yet. Then you get the Howe report this morning that he doesn't see him being with the team for long. So who knows what's going on there, but it does sort of sound like there was at least a conversation about cutting him in the aftermath of this.
CLNS Media's Patriots coverage is brought to you by FanDuel. New customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win.
So now they have to weigh this, like, is it worth it? Is he worth it as a player to deal with this? Because, like you said, he's had all these issues before. If they're claiming someone put the guns in his bag, he's obviously hanging with a bad crowd of people. Or if he didn't know they were there, then he's misplacing his unregistered firearms, which also isn't a good thing. So,
right.
I mean, he had a solid rookie year. He's got promise, but is this worth it now? Because he obviously has these off-field issues.
One thing, again, I think if I read this correctly, there's a ton of legal jargon in here, and I'm trying to get as much of it translated as I can as possible for me. But there was something in there that he didn't own the guns, that he doesn't own any guns in Massachusetts. So if that's the case, like, I mean, they could be his unregistered guns. I don't know why you'd kind of throw that out in front of the court. That, oh no, like they were always unregistered, but maybe that's a way he can prove they weren't his, if that helps. You know, the police report said he handed the cop or the TSA agent, whoever it was, he handed the security personnel his duffel bag that had his name on it, that had the guns in it. And they have that on video. So you can't mince words over whether or not it was his bag. Were they his guns? Essentially, this isn't new or specific or anything like that. The team has to figure out if they were his guns or not. They've got to do their own investigation. They've got to figure that out and decide if they're comfortable with keeping them. And we can't sit here and say, we can certainly sit here and speculate. Yeah, I'd keep him because this, or I wouldn't keep him because that. That's not really fair to him because we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. And I don't really think that does anything for anybody other than feed into what his lawyer was talking about the narrative. But it does mean something to the Patriots, and they actually have the ability to get that information, or they should. I would imagine if Jack Jones doesn't help them in that investigation, he'll get cut. So that to me is kind of where it's probably at behind the scenes is Patriots are pissed. Obviously, this is a horrible look, and they're going to get to the bottom of it and figure out, hey, was this all a horrible misunderstanding? And they still might not feel great about that. They still might say, hey, you're hanging around guys that are putting guns in your suitcase without telling you. Like, that in itself isn't great judgment. Or they may say, wow, this kid really got screwed over. And we, the facts as they were presented initially were not nearly or were much worse than what actually happened. And we're going to keep them. Just knowing the Patriots, I would kind of think it might be the former, whether that's right or wrong. But we'll see. And again, the one thing that could happen is if he gets suspended, I think it extends their window. Because once he gets suspended, they don't have to worry about him taking up a roster spot, and it gives them some more time to figure it out.
There's been some stuff recent years around the league, right? Like, wasn't it Quinnen Williams and I think it was Frank Clark maybe last year? He got 2 games, a little different charges, but I think Quinnen Williams just took a plea deal and he didn't get anything. It was just a small fine, but they're going to see here, but it could take time again. Like, this is Alvin Kamara. We're just naming all the names now, but Alvin Kamara, didn't he play all last year? Like, he's still waiting on his court date for something.
Yeah. I mean, they're all different cases though. That's the thing. It's really, so the Kamara one's interesting. Some of the other stuff, there was gray area.
Mm-hmm.
There was, I think, a lot more gray area in whether or not the guy did it versus literally on video, handing the cop the bag with the guns in them. Like, that's the burden, not the burden, because the burden of proof is what it always is. That's a legal term. The burden of proof is it's on the state, it's on the prosecution to prove beyond a reasonable doubt, right, that he's guilty, but the optics are just a little different. The optics are just a little different with this one. That could maybe change things. And again, as with a lot of this, maybe that's not fair, right or wrong, but I do think that is ultimately going to be the case.
So let's just say he can't play for whatever reason. He's not on the week 1 roster because we just left the spring practices and it was all defensive versatility in the secondary. We were on the same page saying their best 3 cornerback duo is Christian Gonzalez and Jack Jones on the boundaries with Jonathan Jones in the slot or back safety, whatever. So if they don't have him, they still have Christian Gonzalez, but where are you going in the secondary to replace him?
So they have a couple options here. I don't love any of them. They're fine. The one is you essentially go back to where you were last year with Christian Gonzalez essentially replacing Jack Jones, where it's Jonathan Jones and Christian Gonzalez as your boundary corners, Marcus Jones or Miles Bryant in the slot. Kyle Duggar becomes probably your full-time deep safety. Maybe he splits a bit with Jabril Peppers with Adrian Phillips in the box. That's one option. The other option is Jalen Mills moves back to corner full-time. You go Gonzalez and Mills, Jonathan Jones either in the slot or at deep safety. If Jonathan Jones is in the slot, then you have Kyle Duggar at deep safety, Phillips in the box. If Jonathan Jones is at deep safety, you have Marcus Jones in the slot with, and then you keep Kyle Duggar in the box. And I've kind of said my piece on this. I want Jonathan Jones at safety. I like that. And then there's and I'll have something up on this tomorrow morning on 985thesportshub.com. There's the external option. You go and you sign somebody. Now, the names out there aren't great, Marcus Peters is still technically a free agent. I know there was something over the weekend that he might sign with the Raiders. No deal's been done. Maybe you jump in, offer a little more money. But if you start, getting a bidding war, does the Hopkins money fly out the window? Something like that. There's some other names. Fabian Moreau, who played for the Giants last year, is a guy who I think fits their prototype. If they were going to go external, the guy I bet on, the guy I could see them signing the most is Terrence Mitchell. Remember him?
Yeah.
He was with the team in camp last year. He was on the practice squad for a little bit, got signed by the Titans. He actually didn't have a bad camp last year. It's just kind of a numbers thing that he got left off.
He opened as the starting cornerback, right?
Yeah, remember he was like the first player on the field every day for like the first 9 or 10 days, and then Mac finally beat him. I could see them that's the kind of thing they would do. Maybe you bring him back. And I don't know that he's going to be your full-time second boundary corner, but he rotates in and allows you to have both Jonathan Jones and Jalen Mills play elsewhere, opens that up a little bit. But, yeah, I mean, those are all options. They can do those. I still think they have a good secondary, but it's not that Jack Jones is their best player. But if there's one fault with this Patriots secondary, even before this, it was lack of depth at boundary corner. After Jack Jones, it fell off. It was either moving Jalen Mills from safety, moving Jonathan Jones back out there, or going to Shaun Wade. Those were kind of the next 3 up, depending on how you wanted to do it. And now that's really tested. So I still think they can be good, but Jack Jones was the key that unlocked the potential and I think put them in that conversation of one of the best secondaries in football. And now you got to kind of figure out how to wiggle around that and maybe get some of those snaps back.
Because it felt like when they drafted Gonzalez, it almost felt like they were able to upgrade 2 positions back there because he takes Jonathan Jones's place as your premier guy. And then Jonathan Jones can fall back to a slot role or that second move corner or a safety. And that's an upgrade over a guy like Miles Bryant or even Marcus Jones. It's an upgrade, but now you're going back, you'll probably see more Miles Bryant, and Jalen Mills is a good option. We'll see Amir Speed, Isaiah Bolden. I'd still be shocked if they had a cornerback role, but it potentially a roster spot for one of those guys to have a strong camp and work their way up.
Well, that's another guy. I said Shaun Wade before. I was just kind of going off last year's depth chart. If one of them lands on the team on special teams, becomes that emergency boundary corner that Wade was supposed to be. But again, that's kind of what you're getting down to here. Christian Gonzalez and a combination of Jonathan Jones and Jalen Mills is enough on paper, but you lose one of those guys. Now you're in big trouble.
Yeah.
Now you're in big trouble on the boundary. So I think they add somebody. I think they do. And I think it's Terrence Mitchell. I think that would make a lot of sense.
That makes sense. So anything else on Jack Jones before we talk about some other players they could potentially add in free agency here?
I think that's pretty much it. I see we have in the graphic 9 charges. I think it's 10 because it was 5 charges for each gun, 2 guns.
Yeah,
but I see I hate you can tell I'm hedging everything I say. I don't want to screw things up with the legal stuff.
I'm bad with it.
You don't want to screw with that. It's so specific and annoying.
This is why our jobs are talking football. We don't know that stuff.
I always go back to, the clip from The Simpsons with Lionel Hutz, where he's like, "Oh, that's great. You want to be a lawyer. Could you imagine a world without lawyers and it's all these people holding hands and singing under a rainbow?" Yeah. So, and again, I say that most of my family's lawyers. I can say that.